How many of you know there are certain statements that we make that are rarely received well in the moment, but given enough time, enough opportunity to kind of process the statement, kind of remove yourself from the situation a little bit, and you can see, well, that was pretty sound advice. That was pretty solid advice. Well, let me give you an example. How about the statement, just calm down? Seriously, has that ever worked? Like ever? In the heat of the moment, have you ever told somebody to just calm down and they stopped and they said, well, you know what? You're right. Thank you. I hadn't really considered that as an option so far. Or how about this one? You're overreacting. Like if you say you're overreacting in the midst of the conflict or the moment, if you didn't like the current reaction, you're definitely not gonna like the next reaction, right? Your overreacting is just a statement that rarely receives what you intend in the moment. Or how about this gem? Just be patient. Just be patient. Like nobody likes to hear, just be patient. And here's the reason why we don't like to hear, just be patient. If somebody has to tell you to just be patient, it usually means you're in the middle of a situation where it feels like impatience is justified, right? You're in the midst of a situation where waiting feels like it's just simply unnecessary, where anxiety, where frustration, and where urgency feel like completely normal responses to the moment. So when somebody says, just be patient, it can be very frustrating. Like, I want to be frustrated. I feel like there needs to be urgency in this moment. I have a lot of anxiety. Why would I not be impatient in this moment? Well, here's why. Like, we recognize that's a normal emotion, yet at the same exact time, some of the most important things that God does in us only happens while we are waiting. Have you noticed that? Some of the most important things God has done in your heart and in your life has been in seasons of waiting. Now, I understand that just by me saying that, some of you felt it, didn't you? You felt that little internal whisper, that resistance, that quiet, please don't tell me to be patient. It creates anxiety just to hear somebody, even if you're not in the moment of waiting, but to hear somebody just be patient, it reminds you of when you were waiting. It reminds you that you will go through another season where waiting is absolutely necessary. So you hear that small voice inside that says, please don't tell me to be patient. Here's why. What you're waiting on, it's no small thing. It's not like you're waiting on your Uber driver. It's not like you're waiting on pizza to be delivered. You're not waiting for the microwave to beep. What you're waiting on likely is something big. You're waiting on clarity. You're waiting on healing. You're waiting on direction somewhere. Maybe you're waiting on a relationship. Maybe it's because a relationship's fractured, or you're just waiting on a relationship that has never developed yet. You're waiting, and you're waiting on God to move. And I get that can be a very angst-filled season. If we're honest, in this moment, oftentimes waiting doesn't feel like spiritual growth going on in our lives. When we're in the season of waiting, we don't recognize the growth that's taking place and what Jesus might be up to. Oftentimes when we're waiting, all we feel is stuck. Like I want things to move forward, but nothing's moving at all. And I just feel stuck in this moment. But what would happen if we transformed our thinking, recognizing that we're not necessarily stuck, but Jesus is trying to cultivate something richer, something deeper, something more long-lasting inside of us in the waiting? Like, how many times have that turned out to be true in your life? Just take an inventory of the past and recognize how God in the waiting has shown up in some incredibly powerful ways. He shaped you and molded you in ways that expedition might not have done. See, in the waiting, God is shaping us into different people. Like when we stop and we recognize that God might be doing something different inside of us while we wait, all of a sudden waiting becomes a different thing. All of a sudden we recognize that what God is doing inside of us is just as important, if not more important, than the thing we want him to do for us. When God is transforming us inside, it's often greater work than what he's doing on the outside. Now, if you've been along on this journey, you know this is true. Patience has been humming in the background all the way through the book of Ruth, hasn't it? Patience is, it's a short book, so we can read it pretty quickly. But if you recognize the timeline, this is several months in the making. We can turn page by page, but they had to live it day by day. Sun went up, sun went down, sun went up, sun went down. Day after day, week after week. That's what's going on in the book of Ruth. So we see patience humming in the background. You have to read it into the text, but it's there. This morning, though, in our text, we're going to see patience step from the background into the foreground. And the text that we have today has a lesson to teach us about patience. And this is what I think the story presses on in this moment today. Just one verse we're covering today. Ruth chapter 3, verse 18. And this is what the lesson that's pressing on us this morning is: hope learns to wait. Ruth, a story of hope. And if we are going to be hope-filled people, then we're going to have to be people who simply learn to wait. Why? Because God's timeline is rarely our timeline. And I know that's no fun to hear. I totally get that. But that's just a reality. As I look over the landscape of my life, rarely does God show up in my timeline, but he always shows up. So I want to be a person of hope. And if I'm going to be a person of hope, then I have to be a person who learns to wait. Let's take a look at Ruth chapter 3, verse 18. And as you're turning there, in case you haven't been along on this journey with us, let me just catch us up to speed real quickly. There was a gal named Naomi. She had a family. She moved to a place called Moab because a famine had hit Bethlehem, where she was born and raised. And so her husband, Elimelech, he takes his family and they move to a place called Moab. While they're there, Elimelech dies. His two sons die also. Before they died, they had married a couple of Moabite gals. And while Naomi is in Moab, she hears that God has put favor on Bethlehem again and that they are finally getting crops once again. So she decides that her being a widow in a foreign land has nothing to offer her. So she makes a risky decision that she's going to go back to her homeland and move back to Bethlehem. And she does, and her daughters-in-law go along with her, at least for part of the journey. And then she stops the whole thing. Naomi does, and she says to her daughters-in-law, why don't you go back to your homeland, to your people, and to your gods? There is nothing to offer you where I am going. God himself has raised his fists against me. My life is bitter. I left full, but now I'm bitter. You should return home because you've got more promise with your own people and your own God. One of her daughters-in-law said 10-4. She takes off back to the homeland. But Ruth says, no way. Do not even ask me again to leave you. I'm going with you. Your God will be my God. Your people will be my people. A declaration that she had surrendered her life to Yahweh, the God of Israel, the God of creation. They show up in Bethlehem. They get on the scene there. Again, things are very dire for them. Both of them widowed. And Ruth decides, I'm going to go to the fields because I understand that in Israel, God had made a provision for those who didn't have much to walk behind harvesters as they were gleaning the fields, as they were harvesting the grain. And whatever they dropped or whatever they left would be left for those who were poor, who were widowed, who needed some assistance. They could come along and they could grab the grain behind them. And then it says she just so happens to land in this guy named Boaz's field. This guy named Boaz, she left on that morning just hoping somebody would let her get some grain out of the field. But instead, she lands in Boaz's field. He doesn't just let her get grain, but he starts telling his workers, hey, throw some grain out of the baskets for her along the way. You take care of her. Don't you dare take advantage of her. Rather, when she's in my field, you care for her. That's what he's telling his workers. He gives her water. He sets her down and gives her a meal. Like he is unbelievably kind to her. It's amazing. And what we see as readers is God working in the background. When God seems absent, he's actually doing something important. And that's exactly what we see in this story. Ruth goes home and she shares her exciting day with her mother-in-law, Naomi. And Naomi's like, whose field did you end up in? This is amazing. Like I could just see her digging through the grain like, woo, this is a party. And she's like, I ended up in this guy's field named Boaz. And Naomi recognizes Boaz as a family redeemer, one who could rescue them, one who could provide for them, one who could protect them. And this goes on. She continues to go to his field, and it's clear that Boaz continues to be kind and generous to her. And Naomi realizes, because sometimes when you're removed from a situation, you can look in and you're like, I see what you're doing, Boaz. Like, I get it. It's clear that you're falling in love with Ruth, so Naomi hatches this wild plan. It's risky, but it's not reckless. It's a risky plan because she tells Ruth, she says, I want you to clean yourself up. I want you to go to the threshing floors where they thresh, that's where they get the grain to separate from all the worthless stuff. She says, I want you to go there. Don't make yourself known. Wait till Boaz has eaten and he's drank, and then he lays down for the night, and then I want you to go lay down at his feet. Crazy plan. We're not familiar with that culture. What was Ruth doing in the moment? She was proposing to Boaz. That'd be a weird proposal nowadays, wouldn't it? I kind of like the get down on one knee sort of a thing. But back then, apparently, you laid down at their feet. And that's exactly what Ruth does. She says, I will do whatever you ask me to do. And she does. And she goes there and she lays at his feet. And it says that Boaz wakes up in the middle of the night, surprised that there's somebody at his feet. Like, I'm not exactly sure what woke him up in the middle of the night. Maybe his tootsies got cold. I don't know. Maybe she was playing like This Little Piggy Went to the Market. I don't know what woke him up, but something woke him up, and he was surprised that there was a woman at his feet. He's like, who are you? She says, I'm Ruth. And she says, take the corner of your covering and put it over me. What she was doing in that moment was she was saying, I want you to propose to me. You are our family redeemer, and I want you to propose to me. And Boaz knew he was a family redeemer. And it's clear he had done his homework, because he says, you know, I am your family redeemer, but there's one a little closer to you than I am. And I'm going to go to him, and I'm going to ask him if he wants to redeem you and the family land. And if he does, then let him marry you. Now, I feel so bad for Ruth in that moment. She's like, wait, I didn't lay at his feet. I laid at your feet, you know? Like, I want you to marry me. But he says, I'm going to go and find out. If he wants to marry you, sure enough, let him marry you. But if he doesn't, then I will do all that you've asked of me to do. And then he says, stay at my feet for the rest of the night, and I will take care of this in the morning. So that's exactly what she does. And then they wrap up in the morning, and Ruth goes home, and Naomi's got to be just waiting on the edge of her seat. Like, how did it go? It's like first date kind of stuff, you know? Tell me, was there chemistry? Was there not? Like, tell me how this thing went. And she said, tell me what happened. In Ruth, we can't necessarily read it in the text, But I think Naomi's response gives us a glimpse, right? She tells her all that happened. And we pick up the story in verse 18. And this is what it says. Then Naomi said to her, just be patient, my daughter, until we hear what happens. The man won't rest until he has settled things today. Just be patient. Easy for Naomi to say, just be patient. She wasn't the one who went on a midnight run to the threshing floor. She isn't the one who laid down at Boaz's feet. She isn't the one that laid her future literally at Boaz's feet. She's not the one who risked rejection. Naomi's not the one that likely stared at the ceiling for the rest of the night. Remember, the interaction happened at midnight. That's a long time before morning to sit there and wonder what in the world is going to happen. What is going to go on here? How is this all going to play out in the end? How many of us in this room have also had those sleepless nights where we stared at the ceiling? Something woke us up and we stared at the ceiling the rest of the night wondering, how is this all going to work out? What's the plan here? How is this going to play out in the end? I wonder, did Ruth know that there was another family redeemer? Clearly Boaz did, and he had done his homework. I think he'd been sitting around waiting for Ruth to propose, right? This other family redeemer, like, did Ruth want to marry this guy? I don't think Ruth went to the threshing floor that night looking for a cliffhanger, looking to walk away with everything hanging in the balance, not exactly sure how things were going to play out. I think she went there looking for an answer. She went there wanting her future to be secure, provision to be provided, security for her family and their future. And how do we know that she left feeling the weight of the cliffhanger? How do we know she left with the weight of the uncertainty? We know it because of Naomi's response to her. Just wait. Just be patient. Let's see how this all plays out. You know what she was feeling. Likely you've never been on a threshing floor before, but you know the weight of waiting on a decision that hasn't yet been made. You've felt it yourself. And this is a climactic moment in this story, not because something dramatic happens, but because nothing happens. She goes back home. Some barley in her sack. She goes back home, and what is she left to do? She's left to sit and wait. But it's in this moment that you and I can learn something critical about hope. And this is what we can learn. Hope learns to wait. Hope learns to wait. And I have three things that I want us to zoom in on this morning to help show us what it looks like to let hope reign, to let hope rule, to let hope win the day, to learn how to wait while we are still hoping. The first one is this: waiting patiently doesn't mean waiting idly. Waiting patiently doesn't mean waiting idly. Ruth hasn't just sat around doing nothing about her situation. Remember, she packed up in Moab. She moved to Bethlehem. Once she got to Bethlehem and the dust kind of settled, she went out to the fields to glean the harvest. While at the fields, she met this guy named Boaz. Naomi hatches a plan. She tells Naomi, I will do whatever you say. Whatever you want me to do, I will do it. Like, Ruth hasn't just sat around doing nothing. Sometimes we think that waiting patiently for the Lord means we just sit around and do nothing in hopes that he does everything. But that's not what she does. What did she do? She did all that she could do. She had done all that the Lord had put before her. And now what does she have the opportunity to do? Sit and wait. Sit and wait, trusting that the Lord was going to come through in the end. She's not sitting and waiting as a last resort. Sometimes we approach God this way, don't we? We do whatever we can humanly possible without even engaging the Lord in the process. And when it's all said and done and we can't make any ground, we just throw our hands up and we're like, okay, God, you do something. That's not what I'm talking about either. But I am talking about, what has the Lord already put in front of you? What is the Lord already asking of you? Have you put your hand to that work? Have you done that work? If Ruth had stayed at home and not gone out to the fields to glean, I wonder if God would have been like, hey, just so you know, like FYI, I put a provision in the law for this. Like, you could go out and grab some food. It's in the fields. They leave it behind for you. Like, go get it. Like, if I was God, that's probably what I would do. Like, hey, get after it. Like, there's stuff to do, right? But she does. She goes out. And what we see oftentimes, waiting in Scripture is almost always what happens after obedience, after we've done what we can do. You can see this over and over and over again in Scripture. God calls somebody to do something, they go do that thing, and then they have to wait on God to do what God is going to do. So, we go out in obedience, and then we wait on God to do what God needs to do. We wait on God to show up and do his thing. You do what you can do, and then you wait on God to do what God needs to do himself. And then, when you've done all you can, what do? You wait, and you entrust the outcome to him. God, I've been faithful. God, I've been diligent. God, I've been obedient. If it was my timeline, if I was the one calling the shots, things would look differently right now. But they don't look differently. So what do I do in this moment? I learned that hope learns to wait. And then I trust the one who is in control of the outcomes because I'm not in control, which is our second point. Waiting patiently means resisting the urge to control the outcome. Waiting patiently means resisting the urge to control the outcome. The hardest part of waiting isn't actually the waiting. I think it's the surrender. It's when you give yourself over to the reality that you and we don't get to control outcomes. There's one who does, and his pay grade's way higher than ours. So waiting patiently means resisting the urge to control outcomes. What does Naomi say to Ruth? Just be patient, my daughter, until we see what happens. Let's let this play out. Let's see what God is up to in this. Let's let the one who is in control of the outcomes control the outcomes. Trying to control outcomes assumes a very dangerous thing. And here's what it assumes. That you and that we know what's best. We don't. We don't know what's best. Here's why. We can't see far enough down the road to know or declare with any sort of certainty that we know what's best. We're not far enough away from the situation. We're not zoomed out far enough. We can't see far enough down the road. None of us can declare with perfect certainty that we know what's best. And this reality reminds me of an old Chinese proverb. Old man Sai lost his horse. Maybe you're familiar with it. It goes like this. Old man Sai, he had a horse. And his horse runs away. And his neighbor goes, oh, that's so horrible. And old man Sai says, maybe. And then a couple days later, the horse comes back and it brings a bunch of horses with it. And his neighbor says, how exciting. And old man Sai says, maybe. And then old man Sai's son jumps on the horse to break one of the wild horses, and he breaks his leg in the process. And the neighbor comes over and goes, how awful. And old man Sai says, maybe. And then the army comes by because they're recruiting and they're making sure all of the young men join the army. And old man Sai's son sits this one out. Why? Because he's got a broken leg. And this story could just keep going on and on and on. And here's the point of the story. Human perspective is very limited. We have a limited understanding. We can understand the past with a pretty high level of understanding. We can decipher what's going on in the moment. Okay, we've got zero clarity about the future. We don't know what's going to happen a second from now. We don't know what happened a minute. We just simply don't know. Human perspective is very limited. So waiting patiently means resisting the urge to control the outcomes and instead handing it over to the one who does control the outcomes. Handing over our situations, our circumstances, whatever it is we're walking, we hand it over to the one who is in control, which is our final point. Waiting patiently is possible when you're waiting on the one who is trustworthy. Waiting patiently is only possible when you're waiting on one who is trustworthy. Naomi's command to wait, to be patient, it is not random. It's calculated. We see it when she says this, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today. She tells Ruth, be patient, my daughter. Wait. We'll see how this all plays out. For the man Boaz, will not rest until the matter is settled today. This isn't wishful thinking. It's confidence in Boaz's character. She knows him. She's seen how he's responded. And she has great trust that if he said he's going to take care of it today, that by the end of the day, he's going to have the matter settled. Ruth can wait, not because waiting is easy. Please don't hear me say that this morning. I'm not up here trying to give platitudes or cliches, make it sound like waiting is an easy thing. It is not. But Ruth can wait patiently. Why? Because they know that Boaz is reliable. If he said he's going to come through, then he is going to come through in the end. And that's the turning point for us. That's the turning point for you and I. Because the ability to wait is directly connected to the one you're waiting on. It's directly connected to the one you're waiting on. So if we're waiting on the Lord, if we've placed our circumstances at his feet, if we say, God, this is what I want, but I am fully open for whatever you have in store for me, we can trust that God is going to come through. If the one you're waiting on is careless, then waiting is terrifying. If the one you're waiting on is inconsistent, then waiting is very angst-filled. If the one you're waiting on is powerless, then your waiting is pointless. But if the one you're waiting on is faithful, then all of a sudden your waiting becomes faith-filled. Then your waiting becomes trusting in the one who is trustworthy. Then in your waiting, all of a sudden your waiting becomes worship to God. Why? Because you've taken your hands off. You say, God, I trust you with my whole life. There is no greater worship than that. God, I trust you. I trust you in the waiting. I trust you in the outcomes. I trust you with it all. When we're waiting on the faithful one, then our waiting becomes faith-filled. Naomi had confidence that Boaz would follow through on his promise. And we have even greater confidence that God will follow through on his. Why? Because God has never failed to fulfill his promises. And our best illustration, our best point of reference for that is Jesus and the cross. It's Jesus and the cross. On the cross, he secured our redemption. On the cross, he became our Redeemer, the one who could provide for us, the one who could protect us, the one who could rescue us because we were lost and destitute. In Jesus, we have everything that we need. And Jesus declared when he was asked, how can I trust you, or how can we trust you in these teachings of yours? This is what he said. I'm going to die. You're going to bury me. 3 days later, I'm coming back to life. Now, how many of you know that those who come back to life have more credibility than those who don't? So we can trust in the faithfulness of God by looking at the historical figure, Jesus, who said, you're going to kill me, I'm going to be buried, and then I'm coming back to life. Why? So that you can have life in me. That's an incredible promise that every one of us in this room can put our hope, our trust, and our faith in. For some of you this morning, you're already a follower of Jesus. But you may be navigating a season of life where you're trying to own the outcomes. You're trying to control what's going on. Maybe you're sitting around just waiting for God to do something. He's like, hey, get after it. There's some stuff that you can get done too. And this is a season where God says, I want you to trust me. Or maybe you're here and you've never surrendered your heart and life to Jesus. You're actually walking through this life very anxious all the time, nervous about how it's all going to play out in the end. I don't think you're here on accident. I think you're here on purpose because Jesus wants you to know he loves you. He wants to redeem you and rescue you. He wants you to put your faith, hope, and trust in him. Why? Because he's faithful. He can handle the outcomes. And my hope is this morning that you make a decision to follow Jesus with your life, to surrender to him. And if you're here and you want to take that step of faith this morning, grab me out in the lobby. I would love to have a conversation and pray with you today before you leave about what it looks like to surrender to Jesus. Maybe that's a step that's a little bit like you didn't wake up thinking you're going to make that step today, but there's something inside of you wrestling around. We have next step boxes on your way out of the brown doors out there. Grab one of those white boxes, got a little blue label on it. Grab it, everything you need inside of there to take your next steps in following Jesus. And my hope and prayer is that you grab one of those and you surrender your life to him. So let me close with this. Your waiting is an invitation to trust. It's an invitation to trust. And this is why. Because hope learns to wait. Hope learns to wait. And remember, at the start, I said there are some statements we make that rarely have the intended results in the moment, but given enough time and enough distance, we can see that was probably really good advice. So this morning, even if you get a little bit frustrated, a little pushback on this, just be patient. My hope is that you'll recognize hope learns to wait. I got 2 takeaways, and then we're going to pray, and then we're going to be out of here. Number 1 is this. Identify where you're trying to control the outcome and release it to God. Where are you trying to control the outcome in your life and release it to God? Give it to him and just say, God, I've done what I can. I've been obedient to you. Now I'm going to trust you with the outcomes. Number 2, anchor your waiting in God's character, not your timeline. Anchor your waiting in God's character, not in your timeline. And for me, when I'm in seasons of waiting, I've got to do this on the regular. I pause, I remind myself who God is and how he's been faithful in my life, and that even in this situation right now, I can trust him with this thing too. So would you do that this week as we head off into our work weeks? Would you stand to your feet this morning as we close? Father, thank you for your word. Thank you that we can be patient because you are trustworthy. And as we wait, Lord, let it be filled with worship because we're trusting in you. We're recognizing you are who you say you are. You're going to do what you say you're going to do so we can be obedient to you, God. And I pray that that would make an impact on every one of us here this morning, whether we're not yet a follower or have been serving you for decades, God, that We all need to learn how to wait. And for those who have not yet said yes to you, Father, would you give them the courage and the strength to take a step towards you this morning? In your precious name we pray. Amen. Thanks for being here today. Come back next week and bring somebody with you.